a man lived a dull, exhausting life in Japan, commuting daily on crowded trains until he suddenly dies and is reincarnated in another world. He awakens as a small child and realizes he has been reborn as Von Nefertito, the youngest son of Marquis Jalpa Fertio. Although his body is that of a toddler, his memories, mindset, and knowledge from his past life remain intact. As he observes his surroundings, he calmly confirms that this is indeed reincarnation and begins gathering information about his new world through conversations with his maid Till and others around him. Vaughn learns that this world values magic above all else, especially the four elemental magics, fire, water, wind, and earth, which are essential for combat and protecting territory. Nobles are expected to possess one of these elements, and those who do not are considered disgraces. His father and all his older brothers possess elemental magic, and expectations are high for Vaughn as well. From a very young age, he shows abnormal intelligence, quickly learning language, reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and culture under the brutal tutoring of Esparta, his father's butler. Though the lessons are extreme for a child, Vaughn endures them, becoming highly educated in just a few years. In addition to academics, Vaughn trains in swordsmanship under Deputy Commander D. Thanks to his adult experience and discipline from his previous life, he progresses rapidly, becoming strong enough by age 5 to fight evenly with older trainees. Despite his noble status, Vaughn treats servants and lower-status children kindly, earning their respect and affection. His behavior and abilities cause people to label him a prodigy by the time he is 6, though the intense routine leaves him mentally exhausted. Wanting to enjoy his new life, Vaughn deliberately chooses to act more like a normal child and spend time outside. During a visit to the city market, Vaughn witnesses a boy named Khamsin being sold into slavery by his abusive father. Learning that slavery is legal due to poverty, Vaughn buys Khamsin for a higher price than necessary. Though the transaction brands Khamsin as his slave, Vaughn immediately frees him emotionally and offers him a place to stay, keeping the legal status only to protect him from being rejected by noble society. Khamsin becomes deeply loyal to Vaughn, viewing the slave mark as a bond rather than a curse. When Vaughn turns 8, his long-awaited magical aptitude appraisal takes place. Contrary to everyone's expectations, he has no aptitude for elemental magic and instead possesses production magic, a type considered useless because it creates items rather than directly fighting. His father is devastated and enraged, believing Vaughn to be a failure and a stain on the Fertio name. In his anger, Jalpa nearly abandons him completely. Vaughn realizes his life is in real danger at that moment. To save him, Vaughn's older brother Mercia proposes appointing Vaughn as lord of a remote, undeveloped frontier village with little strategic value. Jalpa accepts, seeing it as a way to remove Vaughn quietly without killing him outright. Though the appointment is meant as exile, Vaughn accepts it without resentment. To him, the village represents freedom, peace, and the chance to live independently. He looks forward to developing it at his own pace and enjoying a relaxed life. As Vaughn departs, he is joined not only by Khamsin and Till, but also by Dee and Esparta, who decide to follow him out of personal loyalty and interest rather than duty. Though Vaughn protests, he secretly feels reassured. As the carriage leaves without the Fertio crest, Vaughn understands that his father intended to erase him from noble society, but instead of despair, he feels relief and determination. Everyone learns Vaughn's departure, and gives him happy farewell. With his past life knowledge, intelligence, and production magic, Vaughn sets out to build a new future as the lord of a forgotten village. As the group travels toward the village, Vaughn casually reveals that he has been experimenting with production magic. Till and Khamsin acknowledge his aptitude, though Vaughn himself is unsure how useful it can truly be. When they near their destination, Vaughn gives Khamsin the option to leave and return to the Marquis' manor, even offering to nullify his slave contract and arrange fair treatment through his brother Mercia. Khamsin firmly refuses, declaring his absolute loyalty and devotion to Vaughn, which embarrasses Vaughn but also highlights the depth of Khamsin's resolve. Their arrival is interrupted when they learn the village is under attack. Dee quickly assesses the attackers as experienced bandits or mercenaries, noting that the village's palisade offers little protection against arrows and that the enemy force numbers around 50 men. A heated discussion follows between Dee, the adventurer Ortho, and Esparta about how to respond. Dee insists on fighting to protect the villagers, while Ortho prioritizes minimizing risk to his comrades. Esparta proposes a tactical plan using his elemental magic to erect a defensive wall, draw enemy attention, and allow coordinated flanking attacks. When Esparta suggests acting as a decoy, Vaughn refuses to allow his retainers to sacrifice themselves. He argues that losing Esparta and Dee would doom the village's future and put his own life at risk politically. Vaughn instead declares that he will serve as the decoy himself, riding in openly to draw enemy focus while the others attack from both sides. Despite objections from Till and Khamsin, Vaughn stands firm, expressing his belief that a lord's duty is to protect his people, even at the cost of his own life. His resolve deeply impresses Ortho and the adventurers, who decide to entrust their lives to him. The battle unfolds exactly as planned. Esparta's wall confuses the bandits, and the knights strike from one flank, and the adventurers attack from the other, trapping the enemy in a pincer formation. Vaughn actively directs attention toward himself, drawing enemy aggression and preventing a breakthrough. The bandits are decisively defeated with no casualties on Vaughn's side, leaving the adventurers astonished by both the outcome and Vaughn's composure despite his age. After the battle, some adventurers depart, but Ortho, Pluriel, and others choose to stay, motivated by Vaughn's character and leadership. Upon entering the village, Vaughn formally introduces himself as their new lord and listens as the village chief Rhonda explains their repeated attacks and lack of protection since being absorbed into the Furtio March. Vaughn acknowledges the systemic failures of the kingdom and apologizes, then outlines 3 concrete paths to survival: creating valuable goods, earning money to hire mercenaries, and developing the village's defenses and infrastructure. Although the villagers are initially skeptical, Esparta and Dee vouch for Vaughn's background and abilities, easing their fears. When asked about taxes, Vaughn immediately reduces the burden from 30% to 10%, prioritizing survival and stability over revenue. This decision earns the villagers' gratitude and trust. Vaughn then initiates plans to reinforce the village with walls, moats, pitfalls, and traps, coordinating efforts between knights and villagers. Later, Vaughn begins testing his production magic in earnest. He explains how he senses and manipulates the fibers of wood at a microscopic level, weaving them into ultradense blocks that are lighter than expected yet harder than stone. The results shock everyone, especially when Ortho fails to scratch one with a sword strike. Vaughn shows no signs of mana exhaustion, suggesting his magic efficiency is abnormal. He also experiments with metal, creating multiple weapons and gifts a katana to Khamsin and a huge axe to Till. Recognizing the group's exhaustion from constant travel and lack of shelter, Vaughn decides to construct a house using production magic. With the village chief's approval, he selects a central location and methodically creates reinforced pillars, walls, floors, and a roof in a matter of moments. The completed structure astonishes everyone present, clearly surpassing expectations for something made by a child. Vaughn reflects that production magic, once thought useless, may in fact be the key to rebuilding and protecting the village, marking the true beginning of his rule. Vaughn's production magic astonishes everyone when he instantly constructs a solid, well-made house, prompting admiration from Till, Khamsin, Dee, Esparta, and the adventurers. Khamsin points out that production magic is actually better suited for governing territory than elemental magic, since it directly improves people's lives, though Vaughn modestly argues that offensive magic makes people feel safer. Esparta counters that while combat power matters in war, what people truly want is a lord who improves their daily lives, and in that sense Vaughn is uniquely suited to rule. Encouraged, Vaughn offers to build houses for anyone who brings lumber, which motivates the knights and adventurers to rush out and gather materials. Villagers soon gather and ask if Vaughn can rebuild their badly deteriorated homes. Although Vaughn worries about exhausting himself, he cannot ignore their situation and decides to renovate the entire village, declaring that everyone will receive new homes. Using production magic, he rebuilds the settlement according to a grid-based city plan with uniform houses to avoid inequality, wide streets for practicality, and future plans to rebuild with stone once resources allow. He also constructs a public bath near his manor for personal comfort, which the villagers enthusiastically embrace as a luxury they never expected. The bath is filled using Pluriel's water magic and heated by Khamsin, further showing how cooperation improves village life. Vaughn finally enjoys proper rest for the first time, sleeping comfortably in a real bed. The next day, attention turns to defense and infrastructure. A trench is dug and reinforced, and Vaughn proposes turning it into a moat by diverting water from a nearby river. Everyone works together at an intense pace, with Esparta shaping terrain through magic, others digging by hand, and Vaughn reinforcing the structure with production magic. The canal is completed in just over a day, bringing river water safely into the village. Vaughn then proposes and creates a reservoir lake to prevent flooding and ensure water during droughts, eliminating the villagers' daily hardship of fetching water from afar. With water secured, Vaughn strengthens the village's defenses further by reinforcing earthen walls with stone-like density and constructing ballistae equipped with protective shields. The settlement now resembles a small fortress, capable of repelling bandits with ease. Dee openly criticizes House Furtio for failing to recognize Vaughn's potential, but Esparta cautions that Vaughn's power is best suited for protection and development rather than conquest. Vaughn himself defuses the argument, emphasizing acceptance of circumstances and using one's given strengths wisely. Attention then shifts to the village's economy. While food and housing are temporarily secure, Esparta warns that the village lacks steady income, trade connections, seasonings, and luxury goods. Vaughn resolves to create a sellable industry. During weapon testing, Vaughn demonstrates the terrifying quality of his production magic by slicing through Kusala's shield with a wooden weapon, then instantly repairing it. Adventurers arrive with ores found nearby, including iron, copper, silver, gold, and even mithril discovered unusually in the forest. Vaughn uses the iron ore to create exceptionally high-quality swords, impressing seasoned adventurers and revealing commercial potential for weapon production. Esparta theorizes that the presence of rare ores may indicate a nearby dungeon, which could drastically increase the village's importance but also attract danger, political interference, and foreign aggression. Vaughn explains that if the land gains value too quickly, House Fertio may strip it from him, so the group agrees to avoid discovering the dungeon until the village is stronger and more independent. After securing housing and basic infrastructure, Vaughn finally pauses his non-stop construction. Their moment of calm ends when armored lizards approach the village. Vaughn orders the gates closed and addresses the villagers directly, acknowledging their fear and the risk of injury but stressing that the survival of everyone depends on this battle. He declares his intention to fight for them but admits he cannot do it alone, asking everyone to lend their strength so they can protect the village together. Moved by his sincerity, the villagers immediately agree, promising to fight side by side. Vaughn thanks them and orders everyone to man the ramparts, and the village springs into action without hesitation. Compson reports that Ortho and the hunting party are away from the village. Realizing this, Vaughn decides to remain below and coordinate the defense. He asks Dee to go up to the ramparts and report the situation from above while he issues orders from below. From the ramparts, Dee reports that, around 40 armored lizards are approaching, each standing roughly 8 meters tall. Even veteran knights would struggle to defeat a single one, making the situation extremely dangerous. Hearing this, Vaughn orders Dee to load iron bolts into the ballistae. Trusting Vaughn completely, Dee commands the villagers to load the iron bolts and fire. When the ballistae release their bolts, the iron projectiles pierce straight through the armored lizards, killing them instantly. 10 lizards fall in the first volley. Dee realizes that this is the true power of the ballistae Vaughn created. However, there is only one iron bolt left for each weapon, and many enemies still remain. The second volley is fired, bringing down even more lizards, but the iron bolts are now completely exhausted. However, Vaughn orders Dee to use wooden bolts instead. Trusting his lord's judgment, Dee orders the wooden bolts to be loaded and fired. The wooden bolts lodge into the lizards' heads and joints, restricting their movement. The immobilized monsters are easily finished off, and volley after volley brings them down. In the end, every armored lizard is defeated. The village suffers no injuries, and only a small number of bolts are used. After the battle, Ortho organizes the harvesting of the lizards. He instructs the villagers to preserve the eyes, fangs, and magic cores while discarding the rest. Thanks to the knives Vaughn made, the work proceeds quickly. With an enormous amount of meat available, Vaughn announces a victory feast, and the village celebrates for the first time in a long while. Ortho explains that each armored lizard could sell for about 20 gold, but after spoilage and transport costs, the profit would be around 8 gold each. With 40 lizards, the total exceeds 300 gold. Esparta warns that earning over 100 gold means half must be paid as tax to the marquis, and such profits would immediately draw attention. Vaughn worries that if his father learns the village has value, he will be reassigned elsewhere and lose the peaceful life he wants. Esparta proposes a solution: report the achievement to Vaughn's older brother and let him take the credit. Vaughn agrees, realizing it benefits both sides. Soon after, merchants Bell and Rango arrive, shocked that such a remote village defeated so many armored lizards. Vaughn introduces himself as the village lord and asks them to purchase the materials. They agree and arrange transport, accepting some of the meat for free. Vaughn then shows them the weapons made in the village, which deeply impress them. Rather than allowing the merchants to monopolize the weapons, Vaughn advises them to open a shop directly in the village. This way, profits will increase naturally without drawing unnecessary suspicion. When they agree, Vaughn immediately constructs the shop using his abilities, stunning the merchants. Later, Esparta pushes Vaughn to think about the village's future. He insists that the settlement should be developed into a fortress town capable of housing 10,000 people. Though hesitant, Vaughn accepts the idea and proposes a star-shaped fortress design. He explains that attackers would be forced into exposed positions and could be attacked from multiple directions. Esparta agrees that the design is highly effective. An urgent report interrupts Vaughn when Arb announces that an emissary from neighboring Fortunato County has arrived. Vaughn calmly receives them and introduces himself as the lord of the village. The visitors are Panamera Carriera Cayenne, a newly appointed viscountess who rose from knighthood, and Arteon Fortunato, the youngest daughter of Count Fortunato, who has come to formally pay respects on her father's behalf. After seating them, Panamera immediately tests Vaughn, remarking on how composed he is despite being younger than Arte. Vaughn deduces that they are here to assess him as a potential enemy and possibly win him over. Panamera is surprised that an 8-year-old saw through their intentions so easily and confirms his guess. She explains that Vaughn was given land bordering Fortunato County and the kingdom of Yeleneta, which makes the Count wary. The fear is that Vaughn might act as a spearhead for Marquis Fortio's ambitions. At the same time, the fact that such a young prodigy was sent to a remote village suggests he cannot use elemental magic. Vaughn admits this openly, stating he has no aptitude for elemental magic, but denies having any hostile ambitions, explaining that he was simply exiled by his father. Panamera rejects this explanation, pointing out that Vaughn has transformed a tiny village of about 100 people into a fortress-like settlement in a very short time. She assumes that thousands of troops must have been sent with him to establish a new military outpost. Vaughn explains that he was sent away with nothing but Khamsin and a carriage of luggage, without even a proper farewell from his family. When Panamera questions the presence of his knight, butler, and maid, each explains their reasons. D followed Vaughn out of admiration and belief in his future, even ignoring orders from the chivalric order. Esparta chose to retire and follow Vaughn, seeing it as a meaningful final chapter of his life. Till serves Vaughn because he treats people of low status with respect and genuinely cares for others. Vaughn concludes that this is the simple truth behind his situation. Still unconvinced, Panamera asks how the village itself changed so drastically. Vaughn offers to show her directly. On the spot, he creates a permanent structure, shocking both Panamera and Arte. Vaughn explains that his aptitude is production magic, widely considered the most unfortunate type of magic. He reveals that the moment his father learned of this ability, he was driven out, which is why his father remains unaware of his true power. Panamera openly criticizes the Marquis for wasting such talent, noting that production magic could have vastly expanded his influence. Panamera then reveals her true mission. She was instructed to offer Arte's hand in marriage to Vaughn. Vaughn realizes this was meant as a political move to neutralize him. He firmly declines, stating that while he intends to continue developing the fortress town, he has no desire for conflict, and marriage is unnecessary. Panamera admits that she originally opposed Arte's engagement, believing life in a remote village under a child lord would bring her misery or danger. However, after seeing Vaughn firsthand, she changes her stance and says she would welcome the marriage. Arte is flustered and unsure, admitting she thinks Vaughn is a good person but has not thought that far ahead. Vaughn agrees, saying marriage is too important to decide quickly and that they should take their time. Panamera accepts this and decides to stay the night. Since there is no suitable lodging, Vaughn instantly creates an inn. During dinner, Vaughn speaks gently with Arte, asking about her interests. She shyly admits she likes cute things such as flowers and dolls. Vaughn shows genuine interest and asks to see her dolls another time, which makes Arte visibly happy. Later, Arte thanks Vaughn privately. She admits she was extremely nervous about the engagement, but after meeting him, she feels relieved because of his kindness. Vaughn reflects that he must have made a good impression. Esparta observes that Arte was likely sent away for similar reasons as Vaughn, lacking elemental magic. Vaughn resolves to prioritize Arte's wishes, saying she can stay in the village whether they become engaged or not, and she is free to return home if she wants. Vaughn is woken early by Till and Khamsin with urgent news about the artificial lake he recently created behind the village, which the villagers have already named Lake Vaughn in his honor. At the lake, Dee and Esparta show him the cause of the disturbance. A rare aquatic demi-human called Apkallu, half human, half fish, have appeared, something almost never seen. Vaughn approaches peacefully and tries to communicate. Since they're wary, he offers armored lizard meat as a gesture of goodwill. She accepts and speaks with him, asking who defeated the armored lizards. The villagers credit Vaughn, though he downplays it. She leaves after confirming the answer. The next day, she returns with her father, Ladavesta, leader of the Apkallu. He thanks Vaughn for treating his daughter kindly and confirms Vaughn is the one who defeated the lizards that had been threatening their people. Ladavesta suddenly proposes a political marriage, offering his daughter's hand to Vaughn to secure an alliance and protection. He explains that armored lizards have been invading their rivers and killing many of his tribe, forcing them to seek ties with a powerful human protector. Vaughn refuses the marriage but agrees to protect the Apkallu regardless, stating that Lada Priora should be free to choose her own partner in the future. Accepting this, Ladavesta decides his tribe will settle at the lake. Vaughn immediately uses his production magic to build a large rest facility for them. Vaughn then explains the village's underground sewer system and how moat water is regularly flushed through pipes to maintain sanitation. Since Apkallu are skilled in water work, Ladavesta offers his people to take over sewage management as thanks for being allowed to live there. Vaughn accepts, integrating them into village infrastructure. Panamera and Arte arrive and are shocked to see Apkallu present. Lada Vesta calls Vaughn his son-in-law, causing confusion. Lada Priora also calls Vaughn her husband despite his earlier refusal, worsening the misunderstanding. Later, Vaughn privately clarifies the situation to Arte by the lake, and she apologizes for assuming he had secretly married. The Apkallu grow very attached to Vaughn, crowding around him, rocking his boat in excitement until he bribes them with more meat to calm down. The situation escalates when Lada Vesta hears that Vaughn was talking closely with Arte and accuses him of flirting while engaged to his daughter. Ignoring Vaughn's denial, Lada Vesta declares a competition, Vaughn's side versus the Apkallu. If the Apkallu win, Vaughn must officially recognize the betrothal. Before Vaughn can refuse, Dee accepts the challenge on his behalf, confident in victory. Esparta supports settling the matter quickly, and Panamera expresses interest in the contest. Till and Khamsin state that Vaughn cannot lose, while Vaughn notes they are clearly biased toward him. They hold a 3-round competition. In the first round, volleyball, chosen by Vaughn, Vaughn introduces volleyball. Teams are formed with villagers versus Apkallu. After a close match with rallies and saves, the Apkallu team wins the first round. In the second round, swimming relay, chosen by Lada Vesta, a 2-person relay race in the water. The Apkallu start with an advantage, but Khamsin keeps pace, and Dee uses a powerful butterfly stroke to overtake the final swimmer. Vaughn's side wins and ties the score. In the last round, shaved ice speed eating, chosen by Vaughn, Vaughn creates shaved ice using magic. Teams of 2 compete. Vaughn pairs with Arte. Both teams struggle with brain freeze and stomach pain, but Vaughn and Arte finish first and win the final round. Vaughn's team wins overall, so the forced engagement should be void, but Lada Vesta says he likes Vaughn even more now and still considers him worthy, continuing to call him son-in-law anyway. Vaughn ends up with a stomachache from the contest. After this, Arte reflects on her past, neglected by her parents, labeled a failure, and rejected for using marionette magic, considered taboo among nobles. Seeing how Vaughn confidently uses his own looked-down-upon production magic to help everyone inspires her to try harder again. Vaughn continues village development, assigning safe construction work and motivating everyone by announcing a barbecue after the workday. Arte approaches him with new determination and asks to observe his work so she can learn how to see and act like he does. Vaughn agrees. Panamera and Arte inspect the newly built ramparts and are impressed by their strength. Vaughn explains they were completed in 2 weeks with everyone's help and says more houses will be built as merchants and adventurers move in. Panamera admits she envies Vaughn for having his own land and says she wants to earn enough glory in future battles to be granted territory herself. Panamera notices large weapons on the walls. Vaughn explains they are upgraded ballistae he designed, capable of firing 2 bolts in quick succession. He has Khamsin test 1, proving their power. Panamera is shocked that over 100 of these are mounted on the ramparts and asks to buy one. Vaughn first refuses since they are for defense, but agrees to give her one in exchange for a future favor. She plans to transport it by carriage and says she can make iron bolts herself. Khamsin advises her to also take Vaughn's bolts. He demonstrates Vaughn's forged sword by striking Panamera's spare blade. Despite minimal visible impact, her sword is cleanly cut, proving the weapon's superior edge. Vaughn says it's made from ordinary iron processed his way, and that his ballista bolts can pierce multiple armored lizards. Panamera immediately asks for those bolts too, and Vaughn agrees. Suddenly, Ortho arrives, shouting for everyone to run. A forest dragon is approaching. His party tried to outrun it and failed, offering to act as decoys so the others can escape. Vaughn realizes they are risking their lives. He hesitates between fighting there or retreating, worried about the village's safety. Panamera decides to help, stating the dragon will reach them anyway. Vaughn orders everyone to fall back to the ramparts and prepares to use the ballistae. Panamera identifies the monster as a mid-class forest dragon without a breath weapon and orders Arte escorted to safety while troops take positions. As Ortho's party retreats under pursuit, Vaughn orders the ballista crews to target the dragon's wings and avoid friendly fire. Kusala stays behind briefly to hold it off while others escape, then runs after them. When the dragon enters range, Vaughn orders a volley, but accuracy is difficult against the flying target. Panamera steps forward, saying she is best suited to halt it. She casts Fire Javelin, striking the dragon with powerful fire magic, but it wasn't enough. Vaughn recognizes her as a top-class elemental mage, and realizes this enemy is far stronger than the armored lizards he defeated before. Vaughn orders all ballistae to fire. The volley pierces the dragon's wings and damages them. He commands a second volley, but the dragon anticipates and avoids much of it. Ortho's party finally reaches safety at the ramparts. Vaughn notes they are still in danger if they remain outside. Panamera casts another fire javelin to buy time, but it still isn't enough to finish the dragon. Acknowledging the threat level, Vaughn orders a full retreat to the village. Esparta stays behind to delay the forest dragon even though Vaughn tells him to run. He casts a powerful spell that stalls the dragon's advance. Khamsin chooses to remain with Esparta and tells Vaughn to go ahead and command the village defense. Vaughn continues retreating but realizes the village is still far and Orthos' party is exhausted, so more time must be gained. Panamera signals that she is already in position at the ramparts. Vaughn immediately calls in a favor she owes him for the ballista, asking her to pin the dragon down with her magic when it reaches the walls so the ballista can finish it. She agrees. Vaughn orders the crews to prepare and instructs them to pull back the strings fully despite fear. Dee and his squad arrive with the weapons Vaughn made and volunteer to hold the line briefly. They engage the dragon to draw it closer, then retreat on Vaughn's signal once Esparta and Khamsin make it back. When the dragon is in the kill zone, Panamera casts Flare Blast, locking it in place. Vaughn orders a full ballista barrage. The combined firepower pierces the dragon's scales and brings it down. The dragon is killed, and the defenders celebrate victory. After the battle, Vaughn confirms everyone is safe. Panamera praises his command decisions and states that ordinary villages would have been destroyed. She credits Esparta's magic, Dee's final beheading strike, and Vaughn's ballista design and leadership. She then declares a formal dragon-slaying ceremony is required and names Dee as the one who will receive the Dragonslayer title for delivering the decisive blow. At the ceremony, Vaughn opens and Panamera gives the official commendations. She emphasizes that the village defeated a forest dragon with 0 casualties and minimal structural loss. She names Dee, Esparta, and Vaughn as the top contributors. She publicly praises Vaughn's knowledge, decisiveness, and unprecedented use of magic to strengthen the village and lead the battle despite being only 8 years old. The villagers chant Vaughn's name. Panamera reflects on her own past, born to a knight family, discovered to have magic talent, transferred to a county, trained harshly, became a squad commander at 16, earned noble status through battlefield achievements, and was later made a viscountess. She recalls being tasked by Count Fortunato to escort his youngest daughter, Arte, to evaluate a potential fiancé, the remote young Lord Vaughn, and reject him if he proved incompetent. She had reassured Arte, who feared she was being cast out, that all her siblings were already engaged and this was normal noble practice. After meeting Vaughn, Panamera concludes her worries were unfounded. She observes that Arte has grown more confident around him and that Vaughn is unlike any noble she has met. She formally declares an equal alliance with Vaughn. She explains that he currently lacks Marquis support, but with her alliance he gains political and military backing and protection from interference by Count Fortunato's knights. Vaughn recognizes the strategic value, turning potential enemies into allies and gaining financial and political support, and accepts the alliance. And that's it for this part. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching.